Calling the meeting to order. This is the Village of Riverside Board of Trustee regular meeting for Thursday, June 19th, 2014. The time is 7 o'clock. I'm all rattled. And would you please call the roll?
President Salas.
I'm here.
Thank you. Trustee Sussman. Me too. Trustee Hamilton.
Here.
Trustee Powell.
Here.
Trustee Valerie.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Foley.
All here.
Village Manager Scalera.
Here.
Village Attorney Marks.
Here.
Village Attorney Molina.
Here.
Also present, Village Clerk Haley.
We have a quorum. Will you please stand for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to everyone who's here and the folks watching at home. If you're here and you would like to address the board, you're welcome to do so at any time. We just ask that you be recognized by the president and that you make your comments from the podium so the people at home can hear and see what you have to say. First up this evening are presentations and public comment. Would anyone like to address the board? Hearing none, we will move on to the reports of village officers. I have no report this evening, so we will turn to the village manager.
First, I wanted to, if you haven't already, or if you have and you're confused, residents should have received by now a opt-out letter for the electric aggregation program. We've received a number of calls here at the village in regards to the letter, and I just wanted to inform residents that if you are already a member of the electric aggregation program, there is nothing that you need to do. If you feel that the program is not for you, all you would need to do is complete the bottom portion of the letter and return that, and you will be removed from the village's electric aggregation program and returned to the ComEd rate and supplier. So if you do have any questions, I encourage you to contact the village, and we are more than happy to address any of those concerns that residents may have, but I wanted to at least have this opportunity to clarify that for residents. And then the other thing on my report is President Sells and I, along with Director Bailey, met with representatives from the Army Corps this past week, and we are in a back and forth discussion right now with the Army Corps in regards to some of the items that we identified during our meeting. And at this moment, that really is the only report that I have. Once we have some more concrete items, then I will then address the board at that time. And that is all I have is for my report.
Thank you very much. Next up is the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to have removed?
It says one pound update.
He just gave it to you.
Oh, well, may I say something?
Sure.
Spatney, 111 Woodside. I came to say something nice tonight. The gentlemen that are working there on the wall are doing a really good job. It's a young Hispanic gentleman and two helpers, and they really know how to do stone, and they're doing it correctly. They started out putting some smooth side up, and I thought that was a problem, but then they added an extra course. So in some places, the wall will be one course higher than it previously was, which will help. Of course, the water's going to come around the ends of it, but it will shield it right at that portion where we had the serious washouts next to the cottonwood trees. And they're working on the stairs, but the water came up, so they can't. They're going to have to wait a while for the water to go back down. However, these guys, especially this one younger guy, he really knows how to do this. And I think you should encourage, I would like to encourage you to keep those guys working and do it all the way down, and to let them build, or Anderson, build down at the north end where we got the real big washout problems. And that, I was looking at that today when I was down there. That wall in that corner is going to have to be 5 to 6 feet high to bring it up to grade. I looked down at all the strata of stuff that disappeared, and that disappeared because the Corps put their heavy equipment on there and filled it with rubble. and all they did was throw in crap that you could dissolve in no time. And so that is going to need to be fixed. And this guy, if they pour a concrete footing, this guy could make a nice and attractive wall down there that would match up with the other stuff. I think he's really able to match very closely the effect of the whole wall. Of course, what you're going to see is it's very nice, straight, and level where he did it, and you're going to see the absolute crap that the Army Corps did, and the Humpty Dumpty stuff. And I don't see that that's going to get removed and fixed. But and then the other thing I found was some guys working in a forest preserve from Environmental Design International, and I'll give this to Ed Bailey. They're a company in Chicago. They do work all around. They do, of course, very big jobs, but they do this kind of stuff, and they do the survey and the design and the construction management of projects. Of course, they do huge projects, but maybe there's somebody there that would be able to design this thing to fix this problem where the culvert is in and at the corner, because it's only going to get worse, and it's very serious now. It's all taped up and everything, but I mean it's going to take the next flood will take the path out there again. I mean, it's just going to keep going and going. So it's good news that Anderson's doing it. I wish we'd done it 3 years ago. But anyway, it's good that it's doing it, and they're doing a really nice job, in my opinion. And I invite everybody to go look at it and see how nicely this kid is laying that stone in there. It won't be ugly like it has been since the Corps did it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I forgot to say that. Along with that, Ed is going to have a crew going down there and spraying herbicide along the wall on all of those new little things that are springing out. So thank you, Mr. Spatney. The wall is almost complete. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to have removed? Mr. Ballard?
Can we just talk about it afterwards?
Sure. Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion and a second for approval. Motion by Mr. Foley.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up, reports of departments and commissions. We have none this evening, so we will move on to ordinances and resolutions. First up is an ordinance amending the village code of the Village of Riverside relative to driveway apron paving requirements. Were you going to present this, or Mr. Bailey?
This is a follow-up to an item that the board considered at the last meeting, and Village Attorney Mars has made the changes that the board had requested, and what you have before you is the revised ordinance.
So first, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve an ordinance amending the village code of the Village of Riverside, Illinois, relative to driveway apron paving requirements. Motion by Mr.
Second.
Foley, second by Ms. Hamilton. Debate and discussion, please.
I do have a question. Mr. Mars, I just wanted to double check with you. The system's working. It says here how we directed the attorney to amend the proposed language further to include the guidelines from the state, and those are the changes that are, I don't even know what page it is, on the second page of the ordinance itself? E?
Correct.
So those are all, is that all of what was in the state regs? Is that?
Well, no, there's under the approved membrane compound curing types, there's type 1, type 2, type 3, and then the linseed oil emulsion. You guys talked specifically, and Mr. Bailey talked specifically about type 1.
Right.
And about the linseed oil. Type 3, we talked about it as a negative because that has the bright white additive.
Okay, that was.
Type 2, I didn't really know, but I thought, type 1 and linseed seem to be the big preference, so those
Okay,
are the two I put.
that's fine. Thank you.
Other questions, Mr.
I
I agree with Gene about the brightness and, you know, trying to tone it down a bit. But much like you seal your countertops or your tile in your bathroom, linseed oil is a sealant for concrete that can wear off and will have to be reapplied over time. So I just want you guys to know that, you know, it doesn't last forever on there. It is a, you know, what homeowners can also do to tone down the color of it is they do make a coating which is very good at preventing erosion from salt that would fall off your car in the wintertime. Salt's very erosive to concrete, so any sort of sealant that puts over a concrete, if I was to pour a concrete driveway, we always seal it against salt. People want to salt their walks in the wintertime, the public walks and their aprons. Perhaps they have a steep apron and they need to get traction. So people will probably want to seal that as well. Linseed oil does not protect against salt damage to concrete. It's more used as an additive to tone down its color. So just so you know that it is a good cure, but it has to be reapplied over time.
Then I have a follow-up. When you use the word shall in here, these are the ones that shall be used. Is that, I remembered last week we also talked about how once we pass this, then staff will actually work on making it more specific. So that means those are just examples of the kinds of things that can be used?
Correct. So for instance, if there was something else that staff felt was appropriate, they could put that on the list without it being specifically called out.
Okay, great. Thanks. So Mike, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a question. Does anyone else? Oh, Mr. Wright, please.
Richard Ray, 262 Lionel Road. You gotta understand something. The compound that's being talked about is a curing compound, not a sealer. The purpose of a curing compound is to retain moisture within the concrete so that it properly hydrates and the concrete properly hardens. It is very, very low grade in terms of a sealer as such. It is not a sealer, okay? So if you're talking about sealing, that's an application that comes long after the curing process, which is at least 60 days, and is a completely separate operation. My tendency is to believe, but I don't know it for a fact, that the purpose of the white tinted curing compound was so that an inspector can readily identify the fact that the compound in fact had been applied. And that color will dissipate by time the effectiveness of the compound has achieved its objective, and you'll never know that it was white. I don't think that that white curing compound is going to make the concrete bright over any period of time, okay? Just a clarification of the difference between curing compounds and sealers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. My question is in 843 under construction in paragraph C. It notes that driveways in residential districts may in addition to the Portland cement, may also be constructed of natural stone, brick, and concrete paver blocks. And I had passed out for the trustees in our section 10.7.3 under accessory uses, there is a list of materials that are permitted for construction of driveways that does not match what is in 843. And in fact, this one includes asphalt, brick pavers. And so I guess two questions. One, shouldn't we match these up, certainly in terms of having a list of what can be used for the construction of the driveways? And then a more general question is, would it make sense to allow people to have aprons that match their driveways? So, because there are a lot of driveways in town that have asphalt driveways and asphalt aprons. And as I read this change, we would now be mandating Portland cement as aprons.
I thought we no longer could have asphalt driveways in town.
They're still allowed under 10.7.3.
Oh, I thought, Mike, we talked, okay.
So
Yeah?
what do you think?
I personally don't think we should have asphalt aprons,
No, I agree.
regardless
Yeah.
of the driveway.
I don't think the aprons I think the aprons should be uniform throughout the village. They're on village property, and I think for maintenance purposes and such, it's better that they all be the uniform material. And
And if someone
You know.
comes along, if we're redoing the street, or if, let's say, someone wants to do it in pavers, and they do it in pavers, and we come along and redo the street, we're not gonna go back and put
Yeah.
pavers back there. And on the other hand, even if they have asphalt, I don't think it's right for us to have to then go and, instead of just pounding out cement, then have to bring in an asphalt truck and a whole different set of equipment. We should all make them as uniform as we possibly can.
I had asked a similar question 2 weeks ago, because what we were looking at then allowed the option of concrete or broom finished concrete or the exposed aggregate, and I asked, do we want to allow both? And I think the consensus was we did. I lean more towards saying, an apron's like a curb. It's a part of the infrastructure, and all the curbs are concrete, and so the apron should be concrete. But, if the board wants to allow the exposed aggregate as well, I could go along with that, but I would agree, I wouldn't want asphalt or pavers or anything else as an apron.
So assuming that's the consensus on the aprons, what about the apparent? It's not really a conflict. It's just one is longer than the other. Does it matter?
No, not really, because the apron, there's a reason that a municipality might want the aprons to not be asphalt. Basically, asphalt,
Yeah, I think
He's asking
we're
about
on.
the
one
rest
list
of it.
versus the two lists.
Yeah, because the other list,
Because the other list has to do with what the
it's
driveway
not
means.
aprons,
Very
right.
least there
It would
should be
have,
a
it would allow
reference.
flexibility on your own property, not the right-of-way.
Right, so the way we would interpret it is the broader list would apply.
But instead of interpreting it, why don't you just
Right.
make a reference to it?
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, that's
Clarify.
cleaner. It's
Yeah,
much
that's fine.
cleaner.
Clean it up, yeah.
Yeah,
And so instead of saying may also be constructed of natural stone, et cetera, just it may also be constructed in adherence
in
to
accordance with,
Yep.
yeah.
10.7.3.
So I just want to clarify something. As I said, I'm not in favor of asphalt aprons. There are a number of aprons that are pavers, permeable pavers, and we will now then be saying that people cannot put, I just want to make sure everybody knows this, we're also saying that you can't put pavers in your apron.
Right.
Okay.
So
And I think Joe's point is well taken, which is that if the village comes along and does something and removes that, we're not going to replace it as is. So residents should be aware of that. We're going to replace it with concrete.
I'm looking at Mike, he's looking
Yeah,
very quizzical.
Right, yes, I agree with you. I agree with you.
The only way I've seen it happen differently is where municipalities give some flexibility, but they make someone who wants to do that sign a license agreement, accept responsibility for it, acknowledge that if it's removed, it's not going to be replaced in kind, that kind of thing. But it's never allowed as of code because they don't hold up as well. And the last thing you want is to have someone slip and fall there and claim, well, it's in the right of way. It's the village's responsibility.
And also, a lot of times when they sell the pavers, they talk about this will last for 50 years or whatever. And the street's not going to last for that long, so we know the street will be torn up. And so I think the expectation is the person is going to be upset because their apron is going to be torn up sometime over that period, so.
Okay.
So then the motion, if everybody's in agreement with this, the ordinance will be as written, except that we will have the notice in here that the driveways will be constructed in accordance with 10.7.3.
Correct, yeah.
Right,
I will
okay.
amend 8-4-3 subsection C to make a reference to the other materials listed as permitted in section 10.7.3A of this code.
Okay. So any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman?
Aye.
Trustee Young?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Downing?
Aye.
Trustee Collins?
Aye.
Trustee Miller?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up is an ordinance amending the village code of the Village of Riverside relative to sidewalk paving requirements. Mr. Scalera?
In 2011, the village board discussed the cost differential between exposed aggregate, room finish, and/or dyed concrete. Staff at the time provided information on the type of finishes and the cost differential between such finishes. It was determined that the premium for both exposed aggregate and colored concrete would be more per square foot over the cost of standard room finished concrete. Included at your places is a review by our village engineer as to the durability and quality of the two types of concrete. During the May 1st, 2014 regular meeting, the board again discussed finishes of public walks following a presentation by Public Works Director Bailey related to a village-wide sidewalk inspection program. The board discussed the differences again between the finishes and the costs, and agreed to continue this discussion until their May 15th meeting, at which time the board directed the village attorney to prepare an ordinance amending the village code relative to sidewalk paving requirements, which is included in the packet.
So I'd ask for a motion to approve an ordinance amending the village code or the Village of Riverside, Illinois, relative to sidewalk paving requirements. Motion by Ms. Hamilton, second by Mr. Foley. Discussion.
I would like to ask Ed a question, if possible, Mr. President. Ed, we spoke the other day about the specifications, and we are going to follow IDOT specs, but I was wondering, are they using any fiber mesh?
No.
Richard, how do you feel about a one bag, two bag to prevent spalling?
I thought you were talking about
Using fiber mesh in the mix.
it's just not common for sidewalks in general.
It's common for driveways and all flat work that I do. I use up to a 6-bag mix in most driveways that I pour. It just from a torsional rigidity standpoint of the concrete.
Historically, to the best of my knowledge, sidewalks are plain concrete.
I think if you introduce the fiber mesh, that's probably going to increase your unit cost.
Well, it depends on how many bags you use. Normally, you don't use more than 6 in a load, but you can go 1, 2, and it could add a site cost. A one bag of fiber mesh is $50. It's mixed into 8 yards of concrete in the truck, and so your cost for 8 yards, you can do quite a few squares. The only thing that I like about fiber mesh and flat work is that it does prevent spalling, and if the sidewalk is in an area that is prone to torsional twisting, i.e. trees very close by and so forth, it does keep the concrete from cracking. For those of you that don't know what fiber mesh is, it's a fiberglass hair. Well, I don't have any hair, but it's a fiberglass hair that is blended into the concrete and gives the concrete torsional rigidity. So. But if we don't want to use it, that's fine. Doesn't do anything to the color. It doesn't do anything.
Just for general information for the public who are listening, this is just a quote from the letter that was provided to us by our engineer, Orion Gailey. He said a 25 to 35% cost increase can typically be expected for exposed aggregate versus conventional concrete. And in conclusion, it is my opinion that if both products are properly installed, the quality and durability of an exposed aggregate concrete sidewalk versus a conventional concrete sidewalks are comparable. The choice between the two products is ultimately a decision that should be made based upon cost and aesthetic preference. And this is from our engineer, his summary. Ms. Sussman, you had something?
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments. I just wanted to double check. This does not include the downtown. Remember, we were going to leave the downtown area out of this altogether because of the work that's being done. Yeah. Okay, so that would be just one comment. I know that we can double check that, but I did have, that was the one thing I wanted to double check, but I do have a couple of comments about this because I spent, well, in addition to spending, a good hour on a cement tour with Mr. Foley over the weekend, hour and a half maybe, on
Hour
learning
and a
about,
half.
hour and a half.
Could have
which
gone
was-
all day, Gene.
I know,
Cement
I know. It was actually very interesting. I do want to say that, and then wandering around the town and looking at some of the areas, I am not in favor of changing the aggregate requirement for Harlem, for Riverside Road, nor for the First Division. I have to say I didn't walk around every street in town, but when you walk down Riverside Road, most of it, and let me step back and say that I realize that there's always going to be variation, that there'll be variation with the same brush broom finish or with aggregate from supplier to supplier, from batch to batch. I understand that we're never going to have everything look the same, and I understand that there's a bit of a patchwork, particularly in some areas more than others already. But having said that, when you walk down Riverside Road, when you walk down Harlem, most of what you see is exposed aggregate. And even in the First Avenue, Ben, I went for a walk today in front of your house. Most of what's on Blooming Bank is exposed aggregate, and it just, even if we can tone it down so that, Richard, we don't have the brightness in there, I think that we're going to see a marked difference in those areas particularly. In some areas, not so much, but in those areas, yes, we will see that. And I know that as a board, we're committed to beauty in the town and finding a balance between beauty and cost, and I recognize that's very important. I think this is one example where we might be being penny wise and pound foolish. I think that I would like people to consider that. I also realize, and Joe and Ben have both spoken about this, that we have a huge backlog of squares that need to be replaced. But not all of them are ready to cause somebody to break a leg. Some of them are in worse condition than other areas. I recognize a lot of them have to be replaced, but they're not all on that thousands and thousands of squares so dire that we have to do them right away. So I did want to say that. And I think we have to find a balance. Furthermore, we wrote this up, but we really didn't discuss this for those trustees who think we need to pay attention, who really believe in paying attention to what the commission said. When this first came up, 2 of the commissions voted in favor of moving to aggregate, and that was the Plan Commission and that was the Preservation Commission. And I realize that we're up against some deadlines, although we're not really up against a deadline because we've made the decision to go with the bidding process, but we haven't gone back to these commissions. And I did contact Charlie Pipel, and I have to be very honest, he said for him the color is most important, the fact that you should be seeing the landscape and not the bright white. And he did ask if it was going to come back to him, but I didn't answer that. But I just wanted to point out that this was taken before the commissions, and the commissions voted in favor of the aggregate, and we haven't asked them to go back. I am really concerned about those areas that are predominantly exposed to aggregate, or even the older sidewalks, Mike, that look like they're exposed to aggregate. Mike and I did have a great tour with Mike. I'd highly recommend him for a concrete tour guide. So it's those areas that I don't want to get into the B2 right now, but for Harlem and Riverside Road and the First Division particularly, there isn't very much that isn't exposed to aggregate there.
I just have one. It saddens me that concrete talk's coming to an end, but I agree with Gene. The B1 is predominantly all exposed aggregate from the get-go. I mean, it's already there, and if we replace a square in that area, it should be put back to exposed aggregate. I know more than anyone that this town is all about aesthetics and how things look and how things blend in and trying to make things natural and so forth, and I agree with that. I'm just looking at trying to get Mr. Bailey to the end of the goal line to replace his 3,100 plus squares that are out there that need to be replaced, and can we get to that quicker with a broomed finish? Maybe we could gain, I don't know, another 20% more squares, whatever it is, and that's fine. But if aesthetics are overwhelmingly important, and they seem to be, I have no problem with exposed aggregate. I would like to see us, though, try to get a little better pricing than $9 and some odd cents a square foot. I gotta think that there's somebody out there that can do it. And Ed, if it means leaving the consortium and getting a better price out there, maybe we do that. Maybe, I don't know. That's your job to get us the best value. But I agree with Gene, and in the areas along Harlem and Riverside Road and the B1, B2, it already is exposed aggregates. There's no reason to change it. I just want us to get to the goal line and make our town safer from a sidewalk standpoint, whatever that is, it is. I would also like to see more value driven out of this, so that maybe someday, it excites me that someday people will want to talk more about this share a square thing that we used to have a long, long time ago, where the village would help with 50% and the homeowner would pick up the other 50% of the cost of replacing the squares in front of their home. That's all I have to say. Concrete talk is over.
Mr. Bob.
Yes, I've given this a lot of thought as I was out walking and biking around the village, and I think the village engineer put it very well that ultimately this is a decision based on cost and aesthetic preference. Cost is easy to quantify, aesthetic preference is not. But as I'm out walking, riding the village, when I see the exposed aggregate and I see it done right, I think it's at least 50% more beautiful than the concrete. And I think it's worth the extra money. And so that begs the question, okay, when it's done right, well, these are public sidewalks. We have total control over how they're done. I'm comfortable that the village staff, the village public works department, who oversees these projects, will make sure it's done right. And so my conclusion after, kind of straddling the line on this issue is that it's definitely worth the extra money, because the aesthetic benefit is substantial in my mind, and I'd like to see us maintain that.
Further comment?
When I've been on my concrete tours,
With who?
just by myself, just a solo tour, unguided, thank you. Yeah. There is so much difference in the sidewalks right now. I mean, and a lot of times I can't even tell what is the brushed concrete and what's the aggregate, because sometimes aggregate has so few stones in it. Other times it has so much that it's almost a cobblestone effect. That my preference right now is, I think we have so many that are bad that I would like to see us go with whatever is the cheapest so that we get the most replaced. And this doesn't have to be a long-term strategy, but just right now, as we have the many thousands that need to be done, I don't think that we can afford to pay a premium for those. So I would like to see us try to replace the ones that are the worst and get as many of those replaced as possible for safety purposes, and then we can revisit this when we have a reasonable amount that need to be replaced, and try to go with that. I'm not going to say never, but it would be many, many years before we would ever have something that resembles some type of standard throughout. I mean, there are red squares right now. It's just across the board. It's unbelievable how many different ones there are. So I don't see us doing concrete for a year or two to make that much difference, personally.
It is long-term, though, because it lasts. If you're going to replace 3,100 squares, that's a long-term strategy.
But I'm saying, but how many tens of thousands of squares are there in the village? So, that's my personal preference. Is I think we have too many broken at this point to go with the premium quality.
I'd like to know if I can offer a friendly amendment. Maybe it won't sound so. No, can I don't know, Mike. Is this an appropriate time to?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to know if we could just offer the amendment to leave the exposed aggregate for B1 for Riverside Road. I don't even know if Riverside Road is considered B1. It's probably not.
What side of Riverside Road?
Riverside Road along the river. I'm sorry.
So just one side? The other
That's
side,
what I saw.
The other side we're doing cement?
No, I think it's actually both sides. Particularly along the
So when does
rivers where you
Riverside Road end and Lawton start? Or Riverside Road end and Olmsted start? Because they all we're doing is patchworking the stuff again. Because if you're going to do Riverside Road, it's going to be one side. Because on the other side, then you go from Riverside Road, and then all of a sudden it goes up Olmsted. So when the address starts at Olmsted, do we start brush concrete there?
If I might just interject, I'm comfortable with supporting a friendly amendment as it relates to the commercial area. I'm very uncomfortable about picking out different residential areas and saying, you deserve sidewalks that match, but you don't. I don't like that. So I'm not willing to support that for the other, like the first edition or anything like that. I'm not
And then what you're going to be doing is adding a patchwork that doesn't exist in the first division, to the extent that it may.
Welcome to Riverside.
Well, that doesn't make it right or wrong, but there may be somebody else in another neighborhood who feels the same way I do, but certainly what you're doing then is
I would say that, then I agree with Alan. We can't, the whole village is a historical landmark, and to pick one section, I agree. If you want to stay in the businesses, and I would only do that because of the fact that we're in the middle of this grant process, but I'm not going to start patchworking our divisions. I don't think that's proper.
but you are starting to patchwork the divisions.
No, I don't think we are.
Yeah, by going
I think
into.
we're starting to uniform our divisions.
You won't be uniforming them, Bill. What's your name? I'm sorry, Joe. Bill, it's Bill.
Yeah, first of all, as I said before, I think we should do exposed aggregate everywhere. But setting that aside, I think you can say that between this Riverside Drive and the river, where it's really not a traditional sidewalk in the sense it's in front of someone's home, but where that's along the river, it makes sense to me that would be different.
If you're going to split it,
But on
you're going to
the
split it.
residential side, no, I agree. Because if you start picking neighborhoods, I want my neighborhood to have exposed aggregate.
And
And so then that gets the question, why aren't we doing it everywhere then if we are acknowledging that it's more attractive and a better way to go? But I won't press that point anymore.
And my other comment, just relating to this, is that, and I agree with Trustee Collins on this. I mean, we're not talking about a 5% differential in cost. When we're talking about a potential 25 to 35% differential in cost, then I think we really owe it to our citizens to err on the side of cost if we think we're making an error, but I think we're making a good decision to get the most for our money that we can. And I think it's a reasonable decision to exempt, for instance, the business district or other parts of our central area that are non-residential that we can pick out. Because
So are you fine with leaving the central business district exposed aggregate and
Yes.
the rest of the town?
I thought we weren't going to even that was going to be left out of it altogether.
you were making a
No,
friendly amendment on
I
that.
did not mention the
Oh,
central
okay.
business. I meant that we had already said last time that we were going to leave the B2 out of it because of the grant. I was talking about B1.
Okay, but they didn't leave
well,
it
we're
out.
going to be
Right,
redoing
right,
it
and he-
downtown
yeah.
anyways.
Okay.
So my
So the
friendly
B2
amendment
the
was
B2.
B1 because of Harlem.
B1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can make it clear. So is there a consensus that we do not want this to apply to B2 because of the grants?
grant,
Okay.
yes.
So then the next question would be, do we only want this to apply to residential areas, or do you also want to exempt B1? So why
I
don't we
don't
take
see a reason
why don't we
to
take the
exempt
B1?
Harlem.
Why don't we take the B1 question first? Do you want to
I'd
exempt
like to
B1?
exempt Harlem. I think if you walk down Harlem, it's all aggregate. I think Harlem is ignored by the village. It's something that we never really focus on, and there are business owners there who try very, very hard. There are planters out there now. It would make, it looks better if it's homogeneous. We'll be adding this patchwork that doesn't exist there.
Could I ask Ed, is it okay that we would do that we would say that they're going to replace some squares that are going to be brushed concrete and some that are aggregate? Or does that affect our contract?
We just don't replace any squares on Harlem Avenue.
Well, I've thought as this project kicks off that I would work from the standpoint of the cells, the entire block. And at $20,000 per block, I think that's kind of an average for her cell. that was identified as, the number of squares that need to be replaced, that's only 3 or 4 cells. And I was thinking of working really around the periphery of the central business district, trying to focus on those areas that generate or have experience the most pedestrian traffic. I have no plans for when I would get to the Harlem Avenue area, but I would suggest that if you're going to exempt or designate certain areas that would stay exposed aggregate, it's a lot easier to keep track of if it's simple. The less exempted areas, the better, with all due respect. The central business district is fine, but if you want to exempt certain areas, it would be better to keep them larger areas than small. As far as so anyway, I think especially for this particular year, 2014, there's no problem whether you choose to stay with exposed aggregate or change to room finished concrete. That I can do either one. It's just a matter of you folks choosing.
You have in your mind areas that you would be working on, or either of these areas that Gene is talking about, subject to replacement this year?
Not specifically. I haven't picked out a block or cell, but I continue to want to try to identify those areas that have the highest pedestrian traffic. That's where the safety hazards are, the risk, the liability risk is. And I think generally in the central business district, that's one of the highest pedestrian traffic areas. We're not planning. I don't want to work there because of the grant project. So more on the periphery and. But I don't have any particular area.
So neither B1 nor B2 really is at the forefront of your mind
I have
this
no
year.
plans to do either one of those.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was a good question. I did have another question. So what about why did we stop the shared cost project? Because that could help for instance, I might be willing to pay 50% to have a aggregate square. Is there a way to work on that at the same time that we're moving forward?
I look back and I think the primary reason why we stopped the 50/50 program is that because of the limited dollar amount that was allocated to sidewalk replacement, what happened is if we had a resident here, we weren't achieving the cost effectiveness of the contractor going all over rather than giving sections.
But you could offer it to the people in the
We
sections
could,
that were being,
and that's something that
Yeah.
we could offer again.
let them pay the upcharge if they want.
Yeah, but I was wondering, to Pat's point, if it's only Joe that wants aggregate, then what happens to the cost of replacing it with? I know Joe really wants the aggregate, that's why I signaled him. So.
A square in aggregate, it's $194.
No, but would they be willing to do this square aggregate and this square brush?
We can't do that.
Well, let's ask if
That's
we
another
can.
topic for concrete talk.
If you pass this ordinance and you make it concrete, then it would be concrete. We wouldn't give anyone
Right,
the
we
choice.
wouldn't, so even if you put in the 50/50, you wouldn't allow for the aggregate?
No.
And that's for the reason that you and Pat were talking about, it's just too hard to switch back and forth?
I'd like to just make one point on the 50/50 program. As far as I understand it, I'm fairly certain the village would have to administer that because that would be a public improvement subject to Prevailing Wage Act. So, we'd have to advertise it as such and get certified payrolls and that kind of stuff. So it's a good thing if we can achieve more sidewalk replacement, but I think that's a key component of it from our perspective is the village would still have to administer. You just couldn't have someone replace a sidewalk and cost share because we'd have to have that prevailing wage component as part of it.
Well, how do we do it with our trees that people want to buy and plant?
We plant the trees and the planting is subject to prevailing wages. But it's a contract. The Suburban Tree Consortium actually contracts for those tree plantings.
Through a purveyor that pays prevailing wage? frontage.
Yes.
And I think that I have to correct you on that, because we can enter into an agreement with a private party for that private party to build a piece of infrastructure, whether it's a sidewalk or a tree or a water main, and then they do not have to pay prevailing wage.
Okay. That's news to me.
But you have to enter into an
Yeah,
agreement with
okay.
that private party.
Yeah.
They do you get a letter of credit, or with a little sidewalk, you wouldn't need a letter of credit, but you get some kind of an agreement ahead of time. They build it, you oversee it.
Okay.
That can be done. I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm not a big
just
fan
didn't
of
wanna
50/50
oversimplify
program, but it can be done. I've done it before,
Okay.
so.
One way or another, though, I think there's
Yeah.
bureaucracy as well.
So why don't we, why don't we focus on the material aspect of this, since that's, and we can, with regard to the 50 year later. To go back to the B1, because I'm still not sure, I don't understand the rationale for why we would carve out the B1. Because
Why we would or why we wouldn't?
why we would. Because I think you said that the reason you would want to do that is because the B1 is all
It's Harlem.
aggregate.
I'm talking about Harlem.
Okay, Harlem.
I'm sorry,
But,
I'm
but
talking
you're
about
basically saying it's because it's all
I shouldn't have said
aggregate.
B1. I'm trying to figure out listening to Ed, what's the simplest way of describing it?
Okay, well, let's talk
But
about
I'm really
Harlem
thinking
then.
about Harlem from Long Common to Quincy.
And you're saying that the reason you wouldn't want concrete there is because it's all exposed aggregate.
Most of it is, almost all of it is exposed
But
area.
that's true throughout the
businesses.
entire village.
Well, that's how I feel about the entire village, but that's one area I think
But
where
why
people
would-
are driving, because it's a
but thematically, why would
business
that be
area. Just
different?
like we would probably when we redo, I would assume that when we redo B2, we will make it uniform. I think of it as a business area and that I feel that I sort of want to promote the businesses, and part of it is making it look attractive.
I'm not sure
So
that
that's-
many people driving down Harlem ever notice what the sidewalks are made out of. I'm not sure that
People walk down Harlem. I mean, it's.
Again, we're segregating it, because it's only Harlem from Long Common to Quincy. but
Yeah.
From Quincy
Okay, so-
to,
All right, so let's.
So you feel that way about the B2 also?
Well, let's,
No,
okay,
just-
I think there's
just
consensus
B1.
that we're going to leave the B2
no, I
out.
agree with, we should eliminate the downtown because of the grant, but everything else should be brushed concrete.
Okay, so let's ask, so with regard to Harlem, would you exclude Harlem?
Sure.
I would not, because north of, or south of the tracks, I agree with Joe, that's also Harlem. and-
You would not exclude Harlem?
I would not exclude Harlem.
I would only exclude Harlem if we were excluding every other neighborhood that was primarily exposed aggregate.
Okay, so there's, the consensus is
No,
that.
I would not.
So the consensus is that we're not going to exclude Harlem. So now we're back to the core question of, do we want to go away from exposed aggregate to broom finished in all
Yes.
areas of the village except the B2? So that's, now we've kind of gotten the extraneous things out, so let's go back to that question.
Could I ask for a clarification on the B2? I don't have a zoning map in front of me, but when we say B2, sometimes we're saying B2, sometimes we're saying downtown. Is it all the same? Is there, I mean, is this a B2 property, the Village Hall?
Yes.
Yes.
And the library and Guthrie Park and the train station and Quincy and
East End.
East Ave, okay. good.
East
So
Ave, Forest.
I thought that was the case, but I just wanted to be sure.
Not all of Forest.
Not all Forest, but, like Molly's
Molly's is,
area.
Yeah.
but across from Molly's. it's-
What anyone would look at is the downtown is entirely
Right.
B2, right?
Which is entirely exposed aggregate right now.
Good, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's slimy river.
Don't get me.
Isn't that a song, right? Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's,
It's actually the opening song.
the consensus is to exclude the B2, yes?
Yes.
And so now the main question now is whether, in terms of the rest of the village, we're going to allow, or whether we're going to go to broom finish versus exposed aggregate. That's the question. The motion has been made, but we're still talking about that unless people are done talking. Mr. Morris?
The way it's drafted, it says broom finish or exposed aggregate. So it's sort of back to Doug's question with the driveways. Do we want to just say broom finish except for B2? Or do you want to leave in the option of aggregate? Your contract will be concrete, but you would still have the option for aggregate in the
Personally, I
future.
prefer the option so that next year, if we have someone donates $1 million to us and we want to, we don't need to go through this again. It's just a matter of what contract that he wants to go with.
That's a good point, Pat.
Because my only concern is let's do as many as we can because we don't have a lot of money right now.
Yeah, then what you'd have is a policy decision every year about what to do in the contract.
So then that would kind of go back to what Jim was saying, is if
Yeah,
we do implement the 50/50 program, if there's an option, then the homeowner could choose aggregate if that's what they, right.
Well, unless it's a policy that the only concrete available that year through the village is whatever it is.
Right, your 50/50 could be concrete.
Yeah, they'd have to go with whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think that this board should decide one or the other, because I don't think it's fair to have in here, a choice and then put that choice on our public works director. I mean, this is an aesthetic question that's going to extend to the whole
It's
village.
not, that's not, I don't think that's what Pat said. I think she said
But that's what
it.
this is drafted as. This right now gives.
Well, we could change it to read on an annual basis. The determination will be made
I'd rather
as
just
to.
make the policy.
But then you're just encouraging a patchwork.
I think we need to have a vision of what this community is going to look like in 50 years or 100 years.
I think that's right.
And create that vision now and be consistent. My preference is exposed aggregate, but if the majority wants concrete, that's the vision. We want every sidewalk in this town, except for the B2, to be concrete. And one or the other, I think we need to keep that vision in mind.
I guess that's
So-
another way of how I said it.
So
Whatever.
with that in mind, then, let's go around and have another little consensus thing here. So
What's the-
broom finish or aggregate?
Aggregate.
Broom finish.
Aggregate.
So we have 4. Okay. So it will be amended then to mandate broom finish concrete?
And do you need to put in except in the B2?
Yes.
Can we make those amendments?
It'll take out the
tonight?
option.
Be done with it?
Yes. So, okay. So further discussion? If not, we'll formalize the vote then. And you please call the roll. And just to be clear,
Can I
yes.
add something then? Do we, since the B2 is exempted, do we want an affirmative statement that the exposed aggregate will be the material in B2?
I don't think we know.
Is that in
Well,
there
no,
now?
because we
We
might
have
be using
grant.
pavers.
So we'll just, okay.
But to that point, how do we handle the B2 then? How do we how do we specify what the approved
That's what-
materials are in the?
That's what I was kind of wondering.
How do we what, Ben?
How do we specify what the approved materials are for the
I think
B2?
we have to amend it when we get the plan. Right? I mean, wait
What
till
we're
we get
saying
it.
is that Ed can't, right now, there'll be
Right.
no work done in the B2 on sidewalks.
Which he doesn't anticipate
Right.
anyway.
Which he's not doing
Okay.
regardless, so,
Okay.
yeah.
No, but at the time that the work is done in the B2,
Well, it could just say broom finish or exposed aggregate as directed by the village board.
But we may not know
But they
that.
don't-
It may be permeable pavers. We don't know that yet.
Right, okay.
Because there's no design, so there's no way of.
So we wait till.
yeah, you could wait until that
Till we
point.
get the
Because you just
design.
exempt the B2,
Yeah,
Okay.
and
and then it's just
wait.
not dealt with. We
Yeah.
know that, we don't know what we're supposed to do in the B2,
Okay.
and then that option comes up.
I think that would be much clearer.
That's fine.
All right, so the motion before us then is to change the village code to mandate Portland cement concrete with a broom finish for all areas in the village other than B2.
So the consensus we just took with,
Well, we're going to vote now.
Yeah.
So,
so I just want to be clear on what the consensus was. Hamilton, Valerie, Collins, and Foley are for broom finish everywhere except the B2, or was that to exempt the B2?
No, it was the other, but wait, there's going to be a vote now, so that's what, yeah, but the consensus was what the vote will be, I think.
exactly, yes, one would
We hope.
think. Okay, so we're clear on what the motion is. Yes?
Well, I think that's what are we clear on the
Yeah.
motion?
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
that, it's the room
So-
finish exempting the B2.
So you are removing the words "or exposed aggregate concrete finish."
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
all right.
So it's mandated brush, broom, concrete, except
Except
in the
for the
B2, and then the B2 currently will have no
unspecified.
regulations.
Okay,
Okay. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman?
No.
Trustee Hamilton?
Yes.
Trustee Powell?
No.
Trustee Valerie?
Yes.
Trustee Collins?
Yes.
Trustee Foley?
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on, next up is a resolution approving, of course.
Just a little history lesson, and I think I gave this little history lesson a few years back to the previous board, some of you were on that. Somewhere in the 20s, I think, but I haven't been able to establish it. The sidewalks in Riverside were done in a process which hasn't been done for 30, 40, maybe 50 years, wherein there was a base concrete slab poured, and that was allowed to water cure in those days. And then there was a very stiff mixture of granite aggregate, about that thick, that was hard troweled on that base slab. That's where we got the red and the gray from. I have no idea why there was two, how that happened, I don't know. But most of the sidewalks throughout the village were either this red or this gray color as a result of that. Nobody's used that process for 30 or 40 years, except the township did on the sidewalk leading to the suspension bridge when they redid the suspension bridge. Surprised me, but they did do the two-step process. In fact, they did the topping twice because they didn't like it the first time. Okay? You can find, if you go around town, you will find there still are a few plaques. In fact, there's one right down across the street here. Plaques in some of this concrete. Brass plaques that say what the contractor was that put that sidewalk in. Now, throughout the residential areas of this town, we have plain, ordinary, run-of-the-mill concrete sidewalks, okay? And in those days, it wasn't broomed, it was hard troweled. I used to install those sidewalks, I know. They were hard troweled. And the effect that you get on a hard troweled sidewalk square after 10, 15 years, when the paste wears off of the surface, is an effect which we see all over town. And it looks kind of like that Granulux effect that was achieved with the topping made of granite, but not quite. And that's what we have. So in front of my house, that's what I have. And all down Lionel Road, that's what we have. And we can never replace or try to duplicate the appearance of those sidewalks which are the red or those sidewalks which are the gray. Can't do that anymore. So plain concrete, now we brush it. It's just a way of doing it easier, because when we hard troweled it, it was hard to do. And people don't want to work that hard anymore. So as a result, they want to break it down, what we call do the breakdown troweling. And then instead of coming back 4 hours later and hard troweling till you got that ring of the trowel as you went back and forth across that, they want to brush it with a broom. And that's why we have broom finished concrete. Okay? That's the way it's going to be. And throughout the residential areas, I believe you'll find that 80–85% of the sidewalks are either that red Granulux or that gray Granulux or plain old concrete. And probably you should just replace it with broom finished concrete. okay, and reserve the exposed aggregate concrete for the central business district, and if Harlem has it now, those areas where it exists now in the commercial districts. I was part of the plan commission that did the restoration of the train station, which was before the central business district was redone. And when the track extensions, when the platform extensions were required for the 850-foot long train, the plan commission decided that it should be exposed aggregate. In those days, we did it by broadcasting the stone. You'd hard trowel it, then you'd broadcast the exposed aggregate and hard trowel it again, let it set, and then wash the cement paste off it to achieve that effect. But you'll notice that it's much more erratic, and there's still some of that in front of the bank here. You know, you can see it, but if you go walk down the extensions, concrete extensions of the platforms, you'll see that kind of exposed aggregate. The central business district was not done that way. The central business district was initially done with a concrete mixture which had a stone other than the ordinary crushed limestone that we get out of the McCook Quarry here when you order a yard of concrete, ready-mix concrete. It was a selected aggregate, and I think you'll even find that somewhere in the village code, what that mixture was. It was there. I know it was there because Ed Strake and myself wrote it. That's how I know it was there, you know. Maybe it's gone now, but that mixture was actually there. So it was a stone mixture which they probably got out of Romeoville, where they pit instead of using crushed limestone as they do in the Thornton Quarry and in the quarries in Lamont or in McCook, which is all crushed limestone, therefore white. And that's what was used in the central business district. And for some reason, we got off track, and other stone combinations were used for later replacement squares in the downtown area. So you see now 2 or 3 different appearances of that exposed aggregate, and you see, as you do in front of the bank building, where we replaced the original that was done by the scattering process, and you'll see it's much more erratic in appearance, you know, that have been replaced by 2 or 3 editions of exposed aggregate. So what have we got? We've got a checkerboard of exposed aggregates, as well as all the neighborhoods by and large, just plain old concrete, or there's Granulux sidewalks that were done in the first division here, especially, or if you take the walk down along the river, follow that all the way down to the forest preserves, you'll find the red Granulux, you'll find the gray Granulux, you'll find some squares of exposed aggregate, you'll find some squares of just plain old concrete, you'll find some squares of brushed concrete because they were replaced for one reason or another. So you got the whole family. If you just walk down, right down along the river here, the sidewalk, which has no real reason for being, but it's there. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Ray.
Just a history lesson.
See, I would have gone on Richard's tour because I think it would have been much more
I
extensive.
was just gonna say, Foley has really been put in his place.
A pot of coffee on and keep going?
Okay.
No,
Don't be sorry.
I get all giddy when you start talking about that.
It is interesting.
No, you've gotten Mike all
I could bring in
excited.
samples where we've broken out those granules and show you how that was done. We have samples.
I'm so glad this is being filmed for posterity, you know?
You just break a piece off.
I can just break a piece off and might be that.
Yeah, we can go right down here about 150 feet and see it. It's a matter of fact, broken windows.
Okay.
The final item on your agenda is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an acknowledgement of a 2-year renewal of a lease extension agreement between the Village of Riverside and Angelo Senna, better known as Riverside Barbershop. Mr. Senna leased the space at 15 Pine in 2002 and has been operating as a barbershop since that time. The village has entered into numerous lease extensions with Mr. Senna. We've been very happy with him as a tenant in that space. And the item before you is a consideration of extending the lease for another 2-year period with Mr. Senna.
So I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an acknowledgement of a 2-year renewal of a lease extension agreement between the Village of Riverside and Angelo Senna, doing business as Riverside Barbershop.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sussman, second by Ms. Collins. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Thomas.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have no considerations this evening. New business, Mr. Valerie?
I just want to remind everybody that 2 weeks from tonight will be the July 3rd party at Guthrie Park. And once again, we will have the Brat Pack will be our main band, which is all 80s all the time. That really, they did a great job last year. We will also have Brent Kimbrough doing some jazz and patriotic, and he'll start at about 6. And we'll have food from a lot of our local vendors. So, and then we'll have beer and wine at the with Choo Choo and Molly's and things. So we'll have a lot going on. Friday will be the 36th running of the 5K. So I encourage everybody to run over to the rec department and pay their money and get into the race. And if anyone would like to donate to the Friends of the Fourth, because a lot of this is put on. A lot of the band and all of the Shriners and a lot of the extras put on through private donations. And you know, every day I go to the mailbox and there's money in there, and I get letters and I get notes, and it really is, it's really nice to see. So if anyone would like to donate to the Friends of the Fourth, it's Friends of the Fourth, P.O. Box 26, Riverside 60546. And I'd like to, you know, just take a second to make sure everyone knows that this wouldn't happen. It's just not the Friends of the Fourth. It's Public Works. It's the police department. It's auxiliary, the explorers, the fire department, and of course the recreation department. They all, it costs this village a lot of money and time and manpower, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we do. And if you would just give me a second, I want to read a letter that I received from one lady. She goes, "Encloses a donation in the memory of my father, Bob Burke. He died in March, and this is his first Father's Day without him. I was trying to find a way to honor him and thought of your organization. My father loved Riverside, and especially the 4th of July parade. He would get up early, buy donuts, and then head to stake out our family spot in front of Henninger's. He was dressed in red, white, and blue from head to toe. He loved seeing his friends in town, his children's friends in town, and recently his grandchildren's friends in town, and finally his great-grandchildren. I am so grateful for all the fourths we got to celebrate and look forward to many more. Thank you, Mary Jo Burke McCluskey. This is why we do it. Thank you, Mary Jo. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Valerie. So, is there any new business for anyone? Hearing none, I would like to wish everyone a happy summer. A couple of 3 days, we're going to actually start summer officially. I hope to see everybody at the July 3rd and 4th celebration. A reminder that we will not have our meeting the first Monday and Thursday rather, but we will be on the third Thursday in July and in August. And so with that, I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Foley, second by Ms. Collins. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton. Aye. Trustee Pop.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Meeting is adjourned.